in the way that we typically go ahead, Matt, I think we're going to be doing what? Casting off our dock lines?
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Just let them all go. One, two, three, and four. Yeah.
But in reference to something that you will not have seen, but we did refer to as far as saying casting off our dock lines, we'll probably have to do an episode at some point of operational vernacular or something like that, kind of in the weeds. Maybe we'll do that for our patrons, like a behind the scenes thing. If somebody really wants to dig into the nuts and bolts. All right.
So what are we doing today? What are we doing today?
I think we're diving into, what are we diving into? Sea dogs.
Sea dogs, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really appropriate topic.
And we're not talking the Portland Sea Dogs, the baseball team up in Maine.
No, I wish we were. That's a lot more fun than what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, okay, you're selling it really hard right out of the gate.
I like baseball. Kill me, you know?
Yeah, but people are tuning in. It's like, oh yeah, I'd rather be talking about baseball.
Well,
that's not a great start.
Slave trading, piracy, marauding the Spanish Main, killing of innocents. I'd much rather be talking about baseball.
Okay, well that's that.
But,
I mean, yeah.
And maybe we'll end up at baseball, but that would be a bit of a stretch.
And a very cute little logo with the little seal that they have. But
yes. Yeah. Zehun. So it actually is, I think, appropriate for us to be talking about this because we're shooting this in April 2026. And there is a whole lot going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now with blockades and counter blockades and boarding of vessels.
What's the phrase I've used in, I think, almost every single thing that we've recorded, even all the ones running up to our finally formalizing all of this? It's like we're going back to the future yet again.
We're going back to the future. Yeah, sadly, another way of putting it is that we seem to just not pay attention to the past and take for granted why things are the way they are today. And
the rhyming of history, as I said in the last episode.
You're right. I like echoing, but rhyming is better because it can sound similar but mean totally different things. Yeah. So I like the rhyming thing. Yeah, so we're talking about the Sea Dogs.
Despite the shit that you gave me for using that phrase.
Well, we were on an anti-pretentious kick that day.
Perfect.
So we can be pretentious now if you wish.
Nope.
No.
Oh, in fact, next time we film, I will have a jar and I'll label it, and it's going to be
the pretentious toll.
The pretentious toll, which we reward ourselves with when we've filled it.
So what are we going to Tahiti? Because it's going to fund it.
I'll be like a month or two.
Yeah, probably. Short time.
Yeah.
No, I think today, given...
You're going to run us through. I'm going to do my level best to just zip it.
Distract the hell out of me.
No. For the next 10, 15 minutes, I want you to just unfold what's this tableau that we're... Okay, the jar.
Looking for a jar.
I owe one for the jar for next week.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is the Sea Dogs, which is a group of Elizabethan pirates, pirates, soldiers of fortune, crusaders against the tyranny of the Spanish Main. They've been characterized many, many times in many, many venues. I grew up watching movies from the 1930s and 40s, celebrating their exploits against continental tyranny, not surprising at the same time as Britain was, to many people, in the late 30s and early 40s, standing alone against continental European tyranny in the form of Nazi Germany, not Philip of Spain, but in Garrett Mattingly's famous book about the Spanish Armada, which we'll get to at the end, because they sort of all do sort of cameo appearances in that, was really about, drawing one of these rhyming moments between Britain during the Blitz in 1940 and Britain standing against the powers of Habsburg Spain in 1588. So these guys have been, Errol Flynn has played them, Basil Rathbone has fought against them, may have played one at one point, Captain Blood, all these pirate narratives. Just think about swashbuckling and buckles of swash. And you're probably talking about one of these characters, whether it's John Smith, John Hawkins, Richard Grenville, Sir Walter Raleigh. These are all fairly well-known names in early modern English history.
No, I mean, and here's the only place I'll interject, because I know you've been concerned about this, is that you're working off of your work as a professional historian
Right.
to be able to recount this. This is not necessarily your your forte.
No, yeah, this is, I know something about this,
Yeah.
but there are many people who have written far
Yeah.
more, far greater depth.
And we'll reference those folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll put links to their work.
We'll
like,
dig up the
yeah.
things that make sense, at
Yeah.
least the ones that the works that we've looked at. So anyway, so the short version is that when England and Spain were squaring off as kind of a sideshow to the 80 Years' War that we talked about last time, or in the 80 Years' War episode, you basically, Elizabeth was in a very difficult situation. She was being courted by Philip of Spain with the idea being marry Elizabeth, revert England to Catholicism, and in doing so, cut off the financial support and military support that England was providing the Dutch rebels in the Low Countries. Elizabeth wasn't interested in that for lots of reasons, and basically decided to say, yeah, fuck off. The problem was that the British nation she had a very weak, at the time, a weak reign. She was a woman who inherited her throne from Henry VIII. There was a lot of people who didn't like that. There was a lot of Catholics, closet Catholics, or not so closeted Catholics, that some of whom tried to kill her. There was massive espionage going on at the time, and it was not a stable reign. And the English nation itself hadn't really recovered fully from the War of the Roses. So her ability to stand up against the might and power of Spain, the most powerful nation in Europe at the time, she had to play a very coy game of opposing but not being seen to oppose Spanish interests. Now, one of the things that she was able to take advantage of was a group of courtiers who, it's interesting, I'm trying to remember whose work this was. Certainly Walt Woodward's work on John Smith supports this. I want to say
John Smith, the John Smith.
The John Smith, yeah,
Okay.
of Jamestown fame.
So he was a sea dog.
He was one of the younger ones.
Okay.
Most of these guys were not a full generation older, but he was sort of the youngest of the lot. But they were all either peripheral to court or just outside the realm of legitimacy. So they were illegitimate sons of a courtier, or their family had lost these things. And so these guys were seeking to get inside the club. And this is a theme that if you look at some of the work on Cortez's, the people that Cortez marched with, there's mostly middle-class lawyers that followed him to Mexico. They wanted to make the jump from the middle class to nobility. What better way than to continue on waging war against your king's enemies? And so the Sea Dogs, in many ways, shared this almost outsider status. Like they can look through the window and see the ball, but no one's going to open the door for them until they had a reason to. And that's what a lot of these guys are trying to do, is they were trying to come up with a reason why Elizabeth should ennoble them, or at least reward them. And what wound up emerging was a coterie of people who embraced radical Protestantism, fueled mostly by the Black Legend, which we probably won't get into today, but basically this idea, it's a propaganda campaign by English Protestants, citing Bartolomeo de las Casas' recountings of Spanish actions in the New World, but basically really amplifying them to create a vision of Spanish Catholics as being subhuman and worthy of destruction. Mm-hmm. It was a very early, very effective, but propaganda nonetheless campaign. Yeah. Mobilized by that, we would call it, I don't know, we have our own versions of it today. I'm not sure what the modern term would be, but skewed vision of the world, this grasping personal ambition, and a willingness to kind of like suspend humanity when it came to getting what they wanted.
Classic thing, though, creating the other, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, a lot of othering. Yeah. And so John Hawkins is probably the first one. John Hawkins was a...
Hawkins or
Hawkins, Hawkins. He illegally traded for slaves to the Spanish Main in, I want to say, the 1560s, and made a killing. doing so. Now, England at the time was not allowed to trade for slaves in Africa, certainly not allowed to bring them across the Atlantic, and certainly not allowed to sell them to Spanish colonists in the New World. That said, Spanish colonists in the New World didn't give a damn. Coastal African nations, I mean, Hawkins tried to trade for some, and when he couldn't get enslaved people that were already enslaved by Africans or Europeans, he went and enslaved them himself. Depraved guy.
Wow.
Made a ton of money the first voyage, so much so that Elizabeth was like, hey, not only do I want to share, do I want to invest in this on your second voyage, I'm going to give you my ship, the Jesus of Lubeck, to do so.
Jeepers creepers, really?
Yeah, it's bad.
Wow.
And he gets caught. I think maybe it's his third voyage. I think he dies in his third voyage.
Who's he get caught by?
The Spanish.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
problematic.
Yeah.
At least from Elizabeth's perspective, who's trying to have plausible deniability.
Like, I don't know who he is.
Yeah, except
not my boat.
he didn't get rid of the papers. Yeah, it was bad. So anyway, he runs these slave trading voyages to the New World. I think he does 3 of them. He's an underwriter of a fourth, or an investor in a fourth. Basically, if he couldn't get prices that he wanted, he would open fire on the village to extort, gun to the head, extort.
Wow.
Oh yeah. These people were not nice. Walter Raleigh, I think, was probably even more obsessed about fighting the Catholics. He waged a personal campaign against the Catholics. He marauded the Spanish and Portuguese coastlines in the 1570s. Garrett Mattingly cites his burning of a ship of barrel staves, cured barrel staves, as being instrumental in the immobility of the Spanish Armada. We talked about that last time.
Right.
But he had no problem. None of these guys had any problem. Sure, stealing stolen gold and jewels, sacking treasure mule trains of silver coming across the Straits of Panama, seizing towns and villages, shaking them down for money, or just killing people because they're Catholic. It was pretty bad stuff. But what was driving it was first off, Elizabeth needed to be able to hurt the financial sinews that were fueling and funding Philip's war in the Low Country, but also fueling his potential threat to England. So like what Ukraine is doing now by blowing up Russian oil refineries, right. She was attacking the sources of revenue from Spain.
It's not just revenue, but energy.
Everything.
Yeah.
But the other thing that she benefited from was this, it was a concept that emerged out of the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis in the 1560s that basically kind of unofficially set up a notion of no peace beyond the line. And the line was basically from the latitude of, I want to say, the Straits of Gibraltar out to the meridian past Ireland. So that northeast Atlantic, you couldn't attack your religious dynastic rivals. But beyond that line, kind of all bets are off.
Is that the beginning of what we know today as kind of maritime law as far as...
Well, it wasn't the term no peace beyond the line was coined after the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis, if I understand correctly. It was emerging, like the chaos that could reign at sea was starting to drive people to start to think about, maybe we should have some laws out there that prevents it from being a free-for-all. And it wouldn't come until the early 17th century where you have Hugo Grotius writing about the free sea, mare liberum, to counter Spain's argument of a mare clausum, the idea that a nation state has the right to control strategic waterways.
Okay.
Through the 17th century, that free right the right of free passage and free trade on open seas outside territorial waters was pretty well established. But the downright marine-based terrorism that the Sea Dogs inflicted upon the Spanish colonies in the New World I mean, that was a very compelling argument for like, maybe we should like think about some laws against international piracy and things like
As
that.
we get to this point, we're starting to diverge off into a little bit of a little more of the what was the how
Yeah.
this was important. Can you give me a really concise, like Cliff's Notes version, like what's it today, Spark Notes version of what did the Sea Dogs do?
Exactly what I've been talking about.
Okay.
They waged a private, semi-official, plausibly deniable by Elizabeth personal war against the Spanish crown. They attacked villages, they traded enslaved peoples from Africa, they used violence to get what they want. Walter Raleigh sailed around the world. They did a lot of amazing maritime things from an operational perspective, but they did it in the name of basically bringing the fight to innocent people, Native American, Africans, Spanish, didn't matter to these guys. We would call them terrorists now, frankly, radical religious terrorists, in my view. Some might disagree with that, but they were motivated by an extreme interpretation of Protestantism, and they felt that anyone who didn't agree with them was worthy to be put to the sword.
So do you think it was
Which is not a rare, at that time, that was pretty common concept.
right?
Yeah.
But was it principally a religious motivation or was it economic?
That's a good question. We as moderns weave these things, we unthread these things together. I think in the early modern period, the notion of personal ambition, political status, godliness, these were all kind of woven together. They were starting to unweave.
Difficult to extricate, right?
Yeah.
It was what one
They were starting to fray apart.
because in that era, if we think of it through that lens, imagine it not being religiously motivated. You'd be viewed as a heretic.
And how
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you go through the motions or
Yeah, sure, why not?
why not? And so that's a
Particularly
possibility
if you're
as well.
moving up from middle class up into the landed gentry.
But we also can't take our modern values that separate economics and religion and geopolitics and impose that into the past. So we have
you can't
to
impose it. You can separate them out
For analysis, yeah.
Yes, for analysis.
Yeah. And so what these guys were all trying to do was by being perhaps, and
They're trying to ingratiate themselves to the royalty.
well, yes, and enrich themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, John Smith spent the rest of his life after he left North America trying to become a great landowner in North America, and then eventually he gave up and just started promoting English settlement along with the Hackloids. English settlement in North America. I'll get to John Smith later.
Okay.
But
Probably have to do a separate thing on him.
oh, definitely. Some of the exploits that these guys pulled off, if we remove it, if we situate it within a nationalist context, say during World War II, some of these exploits showed.
Okay. Bring me up more gently than that because
Okay.
we're jumping from 16th century.
Right. So
to World
here
War II. And
the
that-
parallel that a lot of early Hollywood filmmakers,
Yeah.
a lot of British filmmakers, there's a recurring theme in early to mid 20th century filmmaking about Britain standing against continental tyranny. Obviously Britain standing against Napoleon, the Scarlet Pimpernel, the famous film with, I want to say Basil Rathbone was in that, I could be wrong. Forgive me for not knowing my filmography. But another one was a lot of these Errol Flynn, Basil Rathbone swashbuckling movies about, English, freedom versus continental tyranny.
Okay.
And during World War II, that was the way governments wanted to portray the struggle between the Allies and the Axis. So, Richard Grenville's insane attack upon a Spanish treasure fleet off the Azores in, I want to say 1568, 1572, something like that. They fought for something like 14 hours. He was outgunned by like 10 to 1, like in terms of numbers of ships.
Yeah.
They ran out of powder, ran out of shot, were using crossbows and rocks. And they still sank 10 of the vessels of something like a 75 vessel fleet. They took it on with 10, and they sunk or disabled 10 of them. Grenville was killed. They're all killed, put to the sword. But it was, or obviously some of them survived, so the tail got out.
Right.
But it was this insane. I mean, I'm not saying this out of awe or respect. I'm saying that it was an insane assault. Like, this was like
what are you thinking?
What are you thinking?
Why are you engaging?
And everyone was like, "Yep, God's on our side." And in the end, he wasn't. But by God, it was a Pyrrhic victory for the Spanish. And had they won, they would have been richer than the Queen of England, like down to the powder boy. It would have been tremendous. So the possibility of personal aggression, very high stakes.
Yeah.
But what's interesting here is that you're starting to see the beginnings of a questioning about outsourcing violence that wouldn't emerge until really the end of the 17th century.
Okay, take me back and let's unwind that one.
Okay, so Sea Dogs,
Yeah.
basically private military companies. Private, they're not even technically privateers because I don't think they had formal letters of marque. Again, there are people who've studied these folks that will correct me, and I will defer to their corrections. But they were basically, Elizabeth just kind of looked the other way while they went ahead.
As long as they're like, here you go, here's your cut.
Here's your cut and plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Oops, John Hawkins didn't throw away the papers, and so the Spanish knew that Elizabeth was a co-investor in his second voyage. Oops, throw the papers overboard. When in doubt, throw the papers overboard. Dump the weed down the toilet. Plus le change, plus la même chose.
Well, not anymore.
Right, yeah. Well, it depends on where you are.
True.
Feds certainly haven't legalized it. But so you have this privatization of violence. And from a state's perspective, especially a state that is strapped for cash, doesn't have a lot of resources, there isn't really a formal navy in England at this time. You have armed merchant ships that are donated to Queen's service when necessary, and that's what many of the vessels in the Armada may have been, I think.
Is it at all possible? I mean, I know this is a stretch, and of course, obviously, the scholarship has already been done.
Actually,
on this.
there may have been the beginnings of purpose-built naval vessels at the Armada. It seemed like a good idea to privatize the use of maritime violence.
Yeah.
In the 16th century, when England did not have a strong navy and Spain was even stronger still, it may have been a good idea. You let private actors take on the risk in exchange for a cut if they survive. If they don't survive, the crown, it's not out any resources other than a merchant vessel, a private merchant vessel, and a larger merchant marine. By 1700, though, the problems that such freewheeling, privatized exercise of violence nominally in the king or queen's name was starting to cause more problems than it was worth.
Who named the Sea Dogs? Who gave them that moniker? And what time frame are we talking about? Like how long did this? You implied that there was at least two generations of them. They were younger and older.
They were younger and older. I don't think they're separated by full generations. John Hawkins was older. He may have been old enough to be John Smith's father. Mm-hmm. Again, I'll defer to better minds on this. I want to say that the name, like the Waterhuizen, which the sea beggars, which were the Dutch noblemen who took to the sea to fight the Spanish.
And they were named by the Spanish, and they were like, "Yeah, we like that."
No,
name.
they actually embraced the name themselves.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it was a derogatory term, and they were like, "Yeah, that's cool."
Yeah, they named it and claimed it.
Yeah.
I think the Sea Dogs were the same way.
Okay.
It may have been part of this propaganda operation, a way to trump up the exploits of these brave English hearts of oak against these craven Roman Catholic Spanish. And again, this is black legend bullshit.
You're right.
It's just, but this is the way people saw these folks and these events at the time. It was really in many ways that the Anglo-Spanish War of the late 16th century was in many ways one of the first modern uses of propaganda. And it wasn't just in that conflict, but you start to see propaganda being used extensively later in the 30 Years' War.
So this is a direction I wasn't expecting you to go, because you're talking so much about the propaganda
I gotta keep
side.
you on your toes.
I know, but I was expecting a little more of going down the path of the commerce side, as opposed to just the strict propaganda. And
Again, you had this unofficial concept of no treaty beyond the line out of Cateau Cambrésis for a reason. Mm-hmm. Some of the golden age of piracy in the West Indies was over by 1575 because it was a free-for-all. And this is when...
It was over by 1575?
Depending on who you talk to, yeah.
Wow, so that has nothing to do with popular culture.
Blackbeard, they come later.
Yeah.
And Blackbeard is notorious because he represents one of these figures who goes from being a private contractor of violence to actually becoming a legitimate governor of Jamaica, an island I think he helped take from the Spanish in the first place. And in doing so, the crown, the English crown, is trying to sort of rein him in. That didn't work very well.
Yeah.
But that's kind of it. By then, it wasn't as much of a free for all in the West Indies as it was earlier.
Because at that point they are privateers.
Well,
Are they not? Or are they pirates? I mean, so what's that differentiation? What's that differentiation between
legally?
Yeah, right.
Okay,
right.
so legally, a privateer is someone who carries a letter of marque and reprisal from a government saying, we authorize you to attack the peaceful commercial shipping of our enemies.
And the pirate is just somebody who's
He
like,
just does whatever
I'm
the
doing
fuck
it.
they want.
Yeah, I'm doing my own thing.
But maybe getting back to sea dogs. So what?
Sorry, right. So why do we care about that?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is that I think the sea dog propaganda, the popular cultural, if we could see some of this 16th century propaganda coming out of the exploits of the sea dog as kind of early pop culture, and I think you can make that argument up to a point.
Well, that's cool.
Here they are, they're out there, they're doing this cool stuff.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's motivating English mariners to join in and motivating other people to invest in these things. And certainly when it comes to the Armada in 1588, where all these guys kind of come back to roost. Grenville was dead by then. I think Hawkins was dead by then. Because he died. He died of, I want to say yellow fever in the West Indies. But you had Raleigh, you had Drake, you had, I don't know if John Smith was part of that or not. I don't think so. But you had at least Drake and Raleigh, having very important command positions in the Armada. But the fleet itself was filled with people who were wanting to walk in these shoes. So you have this pop cultural thing that also kind of legitimates one radical, well, no, everybody was a radical religious terrorist at that time, frankly. It's the, there was
a
religious wars.
Right.
I mean,
there was a large upheaval
problem.
in what was going on in the realms of Christianity, right? I mean, how can you not avoid that kind of thing?
And what better way to settle these differences than killing one another?
Yeah.
That's what the Prince of Peace told us.
Yeah.
Sorry, you and I don't know about you, but I have a hard time letting organized religion off the hook.
Oh, how can you?
How it's manifested. I'm not saying the religion is the problem,
slaughtering
but
people in the name of?
how people use it to justify things. And we are seeing that play out today.
Once again. Back to the future, right?
Right, back to the future. Thank you, Pope Leo, for pointing out that.
The hypocrisy.
Yeah, the hypocrisy.
That's what it is. From your perspective, and not being an ultimate scholar on sea dogs, but being aware and having done enough professional work around it, what's the importance?
I think these guys, they show us a world that is alien to us now, because we have emerged in the last 100 years through a rules-based system that has actually worked pretty well at rendering international seaborne commerce safe and free.
You think that came out of that era?
I think it's I think it started. People started to realize that.
And this is where we are coming into more of your bailiwick.
Right.
Okay.
I think the 16th century got people starting to think hard about the costs and the inefficiencies, if you will, to put it in economic terms, the problems that having no peace beyond the line as being sort of the closest thing to international maritime law, think of how much money you save if you don't have to arm every vessel you want to trade across the English Channel with.
100%. So,
right.
so even further, because we've been talking about how...
Oh, and let's not even talk about insurance. Because insurance is kicking around as well.
So let's dovetail that with this next question of, you have, as we've been moving slowly into the beginning of Backwinded, it started with the 80 Years' War,
Right.
and here we are coming into this phase.
Yeah.
And we're moving ourselves to North America. And you've already intimated or detailed how the Sea Dogs did have an influence in this hemisphere.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
But one of they didn't
How does the story of the Sea Dogs?
shape us.
Yeah.
Oh, pretty simple. John Smith, Roanoke, 1585.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of this, pitched by Sir Walter Raleigh, one of the Sea Dogs.
Yeah.
John Smith, John Smith himself didn't do this, but Jamestown, 1609. These were meant to be forward operating bases for this type of piratical opportunity. We talked about this earlier, but when you look at the first supply to Jamestown, you're looking at jewelry assayers, precious metal assayers. You're looking at soldiers of fortune. You're looking at people who, coopers, barrel makers. If you're thinking that they're setting up a colony, this is not the right cast of characters.
Right.
They weren't setting up a colony. They were setting up a forward operating base where you, as a privateer, pirate, religious, terrorist,
Essentially a chop shop.
It basically
Right?
a chop shop.
Right.
It was
Here's all my stuff.
you're
What
fencing.
can I get for it?
It's a place where you can fence stolen goods for
Yeah.
credit.
Yeah.
So you can get out there and get more. I mean, that's really what this. I mean, that's
exactly
Charles
what it is.
McLean Andrews. I mean, this is
Really?
what this
Okay,
is.
yeah.
This idea is 100 years old.
Yeah.
I think he's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not current. There's been a lot of scholarship to question this, and I accept it. But if you think about it in the context of the larger European conflict,
Occam's razor. It's a pretty simple.
it seems to work.
when you think about.
I could be
physically
wrong.
Who was there? Right?
I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but,
of course. Because
But in terms of New England, and again, we've mentioned this before, every single early English settlement on the eastern seaboard of the United States isn't right on the water. It's in behind a barrier beach for a number of reasons. Protection from the open ocean, sure, but also it's harder to spot from sea in case there is a Spanish fleet that is looking for you. People knew about the burning of St. Augustine, where French Huguenots were put to the sword by Spanish fleet once they found them. So yeah, we're not going to boldly, stick ourselves out on the opening of Hampton Roads.
This wasn't just genteel.
This is
Gentlemen aboard their vessels with the chivalry and everything. It's like, oh, are you kidding?
No.
You stole my shit, and I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, it was, again, I mean, we're in an age where dehumanization of the enemy, whoever that was, whether it's another Protestant group or it's Catholics versus Protestants or it's Europeans versus Africans, Europeans versus Native Americans.
So let's talk about then Sea Dogs, that history of what that was, what it laid out, and how it's rhyming with what we see today.
Well, before you get there, I want to get back to an earlier question that you had about so what, why.
Yeah.
It also creates a legitimacy for the rebel, the outlaw, the picaresque hero, these people who are doing bad, but their hearts are good.
Yeah.
Call it the Jack Sparrow effect. There would be no Jack Sparrow without the Sea Dogs at all. And, I don't want to sound like a goody two-shoes guy, but
come on, that franchise made Disney a lot of money.
International Talk Like a Pirate Day ignores a whole lot of really awful shit that people did to each other.
Oh my gosh.
As pirates.
The whole
romanticization of it. Exactly.
Jinx.
But it's going to be kind of tough
Sorry,
to continue this podcast
Yeah.
if I can't talk.
Exactly. So we start the beginning with,
old are we?
I'd rather talk about baseball.
Yeah,
and then
I'd rather talk about baseball.
And then I throw a jinx at you, and then it says
And the other thing, and Kevin,
that's always driven
always
me
been the
nuts.
case.
Always driven me nuts. Like, oh my gosh, no, these were horrible human beings for the most part.
for the most part, they were. And there's a lot of scholarly apparatus that props up this romanticization that pirates were these idealized egalitarian communities.
Oh, the whole thing that the actual pirate vessel was more of a democracy. Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, democracy by sword.
Yeah, I mean, once again, we're back to Hobbes. The nature, sure, everyone's equal in a war of all against all. Freedom, state of nature war. Obviously, it couldn't be that bad because the ship would never get anywhere.
Right.
And obviously, there is something to be said about an alternative social structure in pirate communities. But these communities are also incredibly fluid and volatile and unpredictable. I could see these
no way to conduct a
communities.
business.
Well, not.
No,
let's just
not
let's just
sustainably.
say, if I were an underwriter, I wouldn't be issuing life insurance policies.
Well,
But you also, like, if we step back and think about this, and
they weren't getting insured either.
no, they were not. This is a community defined by people who have experienced, and I am not a big fan of historical psychoanalysis, but these people saw a lot of shit.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
of course.
you had a lot of broken people that, by modern standards.
Yeah, but can you really throw that out there? Because think of anybody in any peasant town anywhere. I mean, holy smokes.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
true. What, beating children into obedience is good for their moral upbringing? Damn it, I knew I forgot to do something. But I think there is something to be said about what happens when you build a community around constant fear, constant uncertainty. We romanticize, Jack Sparrow is sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow. But
Yeah.
can you imagine living like that?
No. Oh my gosh.
Unfortunately, there are people in our community now who have lived like that. They're called professional soldiers who experience that. And I can't even imagine that level of fear
No.
and just awareness, constant awareness. I don't even want to. My point, though, is that any society that has that as a key element of its foundation is going to be by nature unstable.
Yeah.
And so these pirate communities were by their very nature unstable and volatile. I wouldn't want to live in one, but then again, middle-aged dude.
So the Sea Dogs were not pirates, but they fueled what came into that. But did they? I guess because I'm trying to wrap all this up with a neat little bow.
Well, I'm trying to separate what the Sea Dogs did and what the popular image of the Sea Dogs.
Popular image of looking back, or popular
Looking
image
back.
of the time. Okay.
Well, it's stemming from the time,
Yeah.
but also the legacy of them.
Yeah.
And because obviously popular cultural representations are really, they live longer than the individuals themselves, and they kind of leave out the parts you don't want. It's really wonderfully selective.
Absolutely.
So on one level, you've got that popular culture
Yeah.
legacy that feeds into Jack Sparrow, feeds into Errol Flynn movies. The thing I love about the Errol Flynn movies, can I please tell the story about Basil Rathbone?
Sure.
Come on.
We're getting a little long in the tooth on this one, but sure, okay.
Basil Rathbone was an Olympic fencer. He could have run Errol Flynn through 47 times while sipping a cup of coffee. And yet in the movie, you have Errol Flynn beating him back. But if you look carefully at some of the scenes, Rathbone looks singularly bored. Yup, Perry. You know that if I just sneeze, you're going to die.
Right.
Absolutely hilarious. We forget that about Basil Rathbone. Like, what do you do once you've gotten a gold medal? I think he got a silver or gold in, I want to say, the 38 or the 34 Olympics for England. What do? You go to Hollywood and you make a ton of money that way.
As a swordsman.
Right. So, but the other thing that I think the Sea Dogs is important for us to recognize today, and we've been sort of bouncing off of this in this conversation, is it was people like the Sea Dogs, the world created by the Sea Dogs, and people like them, the free-for-all that ultimately leads to an establishment of, eventually in the 17th century, of this notion, or maybe early 18th century, this notion of freedom of the seas. Grotius is writing about it specifically to limit, to expand Dutch power at sea in the face of Spain. It sounds like this great liberating idea. Grotius was writing it from a very, very, we would call partisan perspective on this.
And who's Grotius?
Hugo Grotius. He was a legal theorist writing this in, I want to say, in the very early 17th century. In, I want to say, Amsterdam, but I could be wrong about that. Again, I will defer to people who know what they're talking about on that one.
So already deconstructing all of this, even at that time.
Right. Trying to establish a rules-based order that would emerge over time. And as it did so, states, private companies, insurance companies, communities started to recognize that having freedom of the seas outside times of war was cheaper. because you didn't have to spend money on higher insurance rates, arming your ships, paying
because
for
the
lost
insurers
cars.
knew
Right.
that if everybody out, if there are those
Right.
privateers or pirates out there,
Don't go there.
right? Don't
Right.
go there,
And-
or we won't insure you. If you do go there, we're
Right.
not insuring your cargo.
But even during times of war, say during the Anglo-French wars of the 18th century,
Yeah.
which we'll probably talk at length about, there was an established system. There was a legal system. If your vessel was set upon by a privateer or a naval vessel of the opposing nation, they didn't fire gunfire into your hull. Why kill people? Why ruin a ship? Why destroy cargo
Yeah.
that you could make money off of?
Yeah.
You fire a shot across the bow. Yep, time to strike the sails, boys. We've been caught.
Yeah.
And then the whole crew is brought in. They are held in a cartel. It's not pleasant, but they're not tortured. They're probably put into prison, but they're also exchanged pretty quickly. And so even in times of war, there were rules in place to manage how conflicts, to minimize how conflicts could affect normal life.
So
We're at a moment now, today, with the Strait of Hormuz shenanigans going on,
Yeah.
where there are people who are pushing against that rules-based system.
Oh yeah.
And-
oh yeah.
and-
What the U.S. just took an Iranian vessel outside of Sri Lanka.
Right, and Iran just took 2 vessels last night
Yeah.
in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, we have these systems in place
Yeah.
for a reason. The people who lived through World War I, World War II, the conflicts beforehand.
And you're saying this goes back to the end of that era of the Sea Dogs, of a little awakening, like this is ridiculous. We need to put the clamps on people like that
I think
in order
it's-
to add some
Stability.
to
Predictability.
stability and predictability to the maritime order.
Which, putting a boat to sea is unpredictable enough as it is without human
Yeah,
shitheadery
absolutely,
going on.
absolutely. In that
it
era,
would-
long before radar and everything else, and
Even now.
storm prediction. Oh, even
Even
now,
now.
yeah, absolutely.
But
forecasts go 5
It
days
was a
out,
long
lucky.
evolutionary process. I'm not
Yeah.
saying the Sea Dogs began it, but the world that they were in and the actions that they undertook were
Perhaps,
created a world against which people wanted to create rules and systems to reduce that type of,
perhaps exacerbated or accelerated
Yeah.
that transition.
certainly made the argument more clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I think that's a really good place for us to perhaps take a pause, because there's so many other things that
Oh
we're
my
going to
God.
go into.
Yeah.
But we'll call this a pause, or perhaps an end. Maybe are we going to cast our dock lines, and we'll move on to something else at another point?
I think let's get them onto the pilings now,
Okay.
and then I think it's time to get to North America.
So until next time, my name is RJ LaValle.
And I'm Matthew McKenzie, and this is Backwinded.